Just waiting for the cue from the technology department. Okay, good evening, everyone. Rabbi Jacobson here. And I welcome you all, including the web audience. Especially I see some new faces. But as I've said many times in this class, from the Jewish mystical perspective, even old faces are new faces. Because though on the surface level things may seem static or inanimate, but beneath the surface, just like we have pulsating, dynamic subatomic particles that are constantly on the move, so too on the spiritual level there are spiritual particles that are also on the move. So it's always, it's what you see is what you get, so to speak. So if you look, as the Baal Shem Tov says, that when you see, that people are like mirrors. When you see something in another, it's usually a sign that it's reflecting something in yourself. Because you wouldn't recognize it if you didn't have it within you. It's called resonance. So the same is true if you look with surface eyes, with the naked eyes, then you will also see in yourself and in others the surface level, which, as I said, is usually very inanimate and almost dead. But if you look with eyes that can see beneath the surface, then you're able to recognize that there's something being renewed all the time, which of course is a great message of hope in itself, that no matter what things look like at this moment, beneath the surface there's always great potential waiting to emerge, waiting to erupt. And it's really up to us to allow it out, allow that energy out. Now today this is not such a strange concept. Once Einstein, the Jew, I should add, popularized what today is known as E equals mc squared, that matter equals energy basically. That matter and energy are reversible, and matter is just a form of energy that has so-called taken a shape that looks like matter to us. So today, and once we've also tapped into those energies, which we call, whether it's through cell phones, or blackberries, or blueberries, what do you have there, Ronnie? What is that called?
Blueberry.
Okay. Brown berries, or fax machines, or the internet, or television, or radio. So all these signals and all these waves that are maybe invisible to the naked eye are clearly benefiting our lives and revolutionizing everything from communications to travel. And it's only accelerating. So we've become comfortable with the concept of the invisible. So it shouldn't be a strange concept to say something that the mystics always knew, that everything really is energy. And it's just that that energy is trapped within our perception and within a world that conceals the energy within. So my point was that, so though some of you have faces that I've recognized from previous times, but when you look a little deeper, every face is new all the time. And it's also interesting that in Hebrew, the word panim, which is the word which means face, in Hebrew the word face also means panim pnimi, meaning inner. Now usually when you say something is a face value, talking about only the surface level, in English face is face and inner is inner. In Hebrew, the word for face is also the word for internal, for inner. Because in Hebrew, the language of the soul is a metaphorical language, and it's telling us that a true face is reflective of the soul. And those that have those eyes can see in a face. Chachmas Adam Teir Panov, the book of Proverbs says, which is that the wisdom of a person glows on their face, shines on their face. So you can see in the glow of a face. You can also see depression on a face. And this doesn't require any particular magical tricks to read faces. Children are excellent at reading faces. We adults who become more jaded, it's not that easy for the same reason that I'm suggesting. So all this is a little intro to this evening. As I said, so I welcome everyone. Everyone is new, and we have a renewed hope. No matter what happened a moment ago, think of it that the rest of your life is completely open to new potential, new possibilities. I welcome everyone in that context. Now, the theme of this evening is rather a controversial theme, if I may say so myself, and that is religious selfishness. Now, I'm not sure where I should begin, for the provocative beginning or to go more traditional.
Start at the beginning.
And Ronnie's one of the old new faces, that's why I'm turning to him, and he's just standing with a distinctive look. You go back over 20 years, right? Almost 30? You're making me feel old. So, I'll start on a provocative level, if I may, and then I'll go a little more traditional. And that is, I personally grew up in a traditional Jewish home. When you say the word traditional, let me explain what I mean by that. I grew up in Crown Heights, USA, which is a shtetl in Brooklyn. And there are many such shtetls in Brooklyn, and as well as in other parts of the world. My blessing in my life was, among other blessings, was that the home I grew up in, even though I went to a very intense yeshiva education, which means that at age 7, 8 years old, you're already going to school at 9 o'clock and coming home at 9 o'clock, or 8 o'clock, or something coming in that age, maybe a little earlier. In other words, just for the record, that doesn't mean we're studying all day. We also knew how to cut school and do other things, but the standard of study did not end at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So although I grew up in such an environment, the blessing, as I said, one of the blessings was that my home was a non-dogmatic one. My father, who passed away several years ago, 3 years ago, was a journalist. I say was because I don't know if there's journalism up there in heaven. May or may not be. I don't know if you need journalists up there. People can just understand the news on their own without anyone telling them what's happening. So my father was a journalist. As a journalist, my home was open to many different ideas and books and guests, mostly from the secular world. So I had an interesting mix of an education that was both very intensely Jewish and academic, and all that comes with learning Chumash and Gemara and the works, as well as this exposure to openness. So when I became a teenager, and I went through my own challenges, rebellious stages, and trying to wonder and ask the questions of why my hair, and what is this Judaism thing. So I have to admit that I was quite skeptical, and I still maintain that skepticism in many ways. By nature, I was skeptical, and that was, it was a whole Jewish thing. Are we all programmed to do this religious stuff? Or is it really something more profound? Now, the problem I had was everyone I turned to, especially in my yeshiva and schools, authorities were, in my mind, very programmed and dogmatic and driven by fear and by guilt and all the neurosis and all the Woody Allen metaphor cliches that come with religion and Judaism, especially, so on and so forth. The classic one, where the atheist, the so-called liberal niece asks her uncle at the Seder, so, you're so fanatic, she says to her uncle, that if you had to choose between God and the truth, which one would you choose? Between God and the truth. And of course, without missing a beat, Woody Allen has him saying, of course, God. So there you go. How could you debate that? So I had plenty of exposure to that type of so-called, I won't call Judaism today, I'd call people who were so-called misrepresenting Judaism. Or they thought they were representing it, or they didn't know themselves. So there's many reasons for me to have rejected the whole thing outright, simply by those that were so-called authorities. But at the same time, I can't say I was hurt by the authorities, because I never trusted them in the first place. You usually get hurt and disappointed when you expect something. If you have no expectations, you can't get that hurt. So, what I came to learn was, and this is a long story, and I'm not here to tell you my whole biography, what I came to learn was that Judaism, the true Judaism, so to speak, is a best-kept secret, and I had to learn it actually from the books. And I came to realize when I was 17, approximately, that if I was going to reject something, I first have to know what it says. And just to rely on a teacher who's representing what it says is not good enough, to be honest. I have to go to the books themselves. Now, being that I was blessed and I knew the Hebrew and I was able to access it without translations, so that's what I did. I decided to dedicate a part of my life, a good few years, to find out what the books say. I just needed to know whether the Rashi and the Rambam and the Arizal and Moses, for that matter, and all these great names got it or they didn't get it. Were they also programmed or not? Now, not that I was the big judge that I got it, but I did need to know that there was some common denominator, that these were people who were thinking about out of the box, so to speak. And I came to understand that it was actually quite arrogant of me to even think that way, because when you open up the Bible, and you don't even need any interpretation, you read this week's chapter, last week's chapter, about Abraham, and I don't think you'll find documented a person who was a greater revolutionary spirit and nonconformist than Abraham himself. And Abraham is the father of the Jewish people, and the first man of faith that sets everything else in motion. Without an Abraham, there wouldn't have been the rest of it. And Abraham is anything but a conformist, a programmed individual. Actually, he defied his whole generation. He did not accept his own parents' beliefs. He rejected a pagan world around him. He paid the heavy prices. I know that everybody likes to call themselves non-conformists, right? Are there any conformists in this room? I always love to ask that question. You very rarely have anyone. Very funny. Okay. That, by the way, just because you raised your hand doesn't mean that you aren't a conformist. I understand, I see one non-conformist raise their hand in this room. And nobody likes to suggest, someone likes to admit that they're a non-conformist. I don't know if it's about admitting, no one likes to think that they're a non-conformist. So then the question, my friends, is if none of us in this room are conformists, so then where are they exactly? They don't come to this class, is that what it is? The fact I would say is that most of us are conformists. Or better put, most of us are conformists most of the time. I can't say everybody all the time, And I include myself in that category because it's not about just what you want to be, it's what you do. It's not what you think you are, it's what you act upon. How we dress, what newspapers we read, is not determined necessarily by us, just as it wasn't determined by us what schools we should go to. So first, if you want to talk about conformity and nonconformity, you first have to determine how programmed are we in the first place. How many choices are we really making in life? What you were exposed to till age 15, 20 was not even up to you. I'm not saying this as a critique, it's just as an honest, sober analysis of yourself. You have to look at that. So when you think of an Abraham, a man who grew up in an environment, successful environment, much going for him, chose to defy all the standards of his time because he was searching for truth. There you got yourself a man who paid a price. That's not just words, and he joined some type of bohemian club, because there was no such club. He had to found it, and he paid a price. See, we all like to see the glamorous side of being so-called the one who walks the path less traveled on, with Robert Frost, the road less traveled. So many of us think because we read Scott Peck's book, The Road Less Traveled, that makes you a nonconformist. Where he says, his poem goes that I've walked in the wood and I've seen two paths diverged in the wood. And he says, I took the one less traveled on, and that has made all the difference. So it's beautiful, and we all love to, it resonates with us. But how many of us actually took that road less traveled? In action, I don't mean in your mind and what you like and so on. Once we're thrown out of school, I don't mean thrown out, I mean once we're thrown into the world from school, we usually end up in a place where we have to start making a living. So now the living, meaning covering your costs, becomes the driving force in your life, not really your philosophical and ideological dreams. The rare few are able to fuse the two where they can make generate income from their dreams. But most of us are thrown into a world, most people don't even like what they do. And even if you do end up liking it, it's only because by default, you better like it or else what option do you have? So Thoreau put it that most people live a life of quiet desperation. Some would say it's not so quiet at times. But when you think about it, it's a very sad commentary on life. And unfortunately, because we're not free to just explore anything we like because we do have obligations. You have to pay your rent, you have to make ends meet. Forces you into situations which you may not at all like to be in. So your mind may not and soul may not really conform to it, but actions force you to conform to it. And then once you're in that marketplace, there are rules that you play by. And there are rules that sometimes are repulsive and offensive if you really had to make a choice. But then you say to yourself, hey, listen, everyone's doing it. So, so the cycle, the vicious cycle continues. And so when you think about a man called Abraham, who's the founder of this whole thing called Judaism, you start saying to yourself, here, please, there's a seat here.
Sorry.
You apologize if you leave the middle, not if you come. So exploring the journey of Abraham would be a very fascinating way of discovering what Judaism truly is, and not the way it's been presented or misrepresented. And that's going to be part of the discussion here. But I want to go back, since I said I was going to talk about from a more provocative perspective. So what happened was, if I could put it quite in these words, I know it may sound a little weird to you, coming from a man with a beard and a yarmulke and a necktie, is that I learned to become really quite anti-religious. And I still maintain that position, just for the record. And now what I mean by that is, when Nietzsche wrote that God is dead, no, I'm not a nihilist or an anarchist, borderline. Is when he wrote that, what he said was, God is dead, if you really read what he writes, and I'm not trying to represent Nietzsche here, is that the God that everybody has embraced is dead. He was talking, of course, about the Christian God in his writings. So God that was never alive, never deserved to be alive. You know, so when you discover that he's dead, it's not like you become an atheist. It's like Levi Yitzchak Barditchev said, I don't know if we say lahavdil in the same breath with Nietzsche. We do? Okay. He said that when he invited a neighbor who claimed to be an atheist to come to synagogue services, Rosh Hashanah services, so the neighbor said, you know, Rabbi, I like you, but I'm an atheist. I don't believe in God. What's the point of me coming to the services and just pay lip service? And the Rebbe, Levi Yitzchak Barditchever, said to this man calmly, and he said, the God you don't believe in, I also don't believe in. See, the God I don't believe in, that you believe in, I also don't believe in. You don't believe in, I also don't believe in. Which really means that the word has to first be defined before we decide we're going to agree or disagree. Which, just as a footnote, think of it anytime you have a debate with someone, I would suggest go back to the axioms of what the debate is about, and usually you'll find that you both are talking about two different things in the first place. So you may say, okay, if God is this guy with a white long beard in heaven waiting to strike us with lightning when we misbehave, and I say to you, you know, that's the definition of God, I am an atheist. So then someone will say, okay, Rabbi Jacobson called himself an atheist. It's true, but you have to define what I decided to deny or what I don't believe in. And I think that is a vital, vital component in this whole bizarre understanding of religion today. And I came to realize on my own that religion has become everything opposite of what Abraham represented. It is conformity par excellence. All of most religious communities, the way they educate their children, and the school system, and the community, is all about not doing things differently. Not standing out, accepting all this. Al tifresh min hatzibur, that is the expression used. Don't separate from the community. Don't be different. And therefore, it's developed a personality that many people today, I have no question, I haven't done an official survey, will say, is religion cultivate individuality or the opposite? I'd like to know how many of you would say that religion cultivates individuality. At best, you'll say it has its benefits, and part of the price we pay for those benefits is that we have to somewhat subdue our individuality. You know, it's like some people have the same attitude with marriage. They'll say, look, I get certain benefits. Does a marriage cultivate my free spirit? No, now I have to answer to someone, there's a family involved, there's obligations and so on. But the benefits are such that I'm ready to compromise part of myself. That is the general attitude to many things in life. The true single, free-spirited single, would say, you know, is going to be compromised, many people think, through marriage. Now that too, which is not really the theme of this discussion, is also a myth if you really want to know. because it all depends what you mean by individuality and spirit, and what really marriage is also in its real context. But to go back to this discussion here, so if you look at Abraham as the model of religious life, I would like to see how many Abrahams you have today. Trailblazers, pioneers. So here's the story I wanted to share with you. I said I would share it. Goes like this. When my book Toward a Meaningful Life came out, they sent me on they sent me what was called a book tour. At the time I had no clue what a book tour was in the first place. But I've since mastered the art of signing books. So it was an interesting experience for me on many levels. But one of the cities I ended up going to was a city called Santa Cruz, California. Anybody's been there? Mm-hmm. I hope that's not you that I'm going to tell the story about. No, that's not.
I don't think so.
Right. Anyway, Santa Cruz is a very interesting town. It's like an hour south of San Francisco. And it's situated between the mountains and the Pacific, so it has its own climate, its own environment. It's a very peaceful, serene place. It's a spiritual, you could say. And it's antithetical to New York in every possible way. There, no one seems to have a job. All right? You walk around, people mill about, no one's rushing anywhere. Remember a bunch of young people were out there outside in the street. It was a beautiful evening, the night before I went to my talk. And I asked them, what are they doing here? Like, are they waiting for a movie? Are they waiting for something? They said, no, they're just in bliss. It's a term from the 60s, in bliss. So I spoke there at a place called Gateways. It's a New Age bookstore. So the main street, Santa Cruz. It's like, as I said, it's a town that reminded me, I saw in the movies of the saloon towns where people just walk in, everyone knows each other by first name, and they could just spend all day just going from one door to the next, talking about life. And so I spoke. It was a very special evening for me because, well, not just because what ensued, but also it was just very comfortable. People there were in a soulful place before I even opened my mouth, which means I didn't have to go through a half hour, an hour of introductions and breaking the ice and trying to explain that even though I have a beard, I'm a little rational and not crazy, I'm like you. I also know how to cry and laugh and stuff like that. And so we were able to get a little deeper into some spiritual discussion. Well, at the end of my talk, a woman got up and she said the following. She said that she grew up in a community called Borough Park. Anybody knows Borough Park? USA. It's not far from Crown Heights. And she went to a school called Beis Yaakov, which the New York Times would call ultra-Orthodox sect, something like that. And she says, I went to the yeshiva system. I saw she knew Yiddish, and I could see she knew Hebrew. And as a teenager, my early teens, I began to ask many questions. And it was very difficult for me, to put it mildly, because she said, my father was an angry man and my mother was even angrier. Everything was driven by fear and guilt. When I would ask a question, they'd say, be a good Yiddish meidl and sei still, be quiet. You grow up, you'll be like your grandmother, and you don't have to rock the boat. And the education system was all driven by this dogma, as she put it, to a point, I remember the word she used, my soul was asphyxiated. Could not take it any longer. At age 17, I decided I'm out of here. She left her home, her community, which of course was not an easy thing to do. And she said, I'm sure my parents must have sat shiva for me, which is a sign of mourning for my breaking away. And I moved to the West Coast, LA, and then to San Francisco. And I discovered God. I discovered God in Zen Buddhism and in LSD. Why is that funny?
Let's start davening.
Right, so LSD is not the acronym for Let's Start Davening. Is that? So, and then I finally settled down in Santa Cruz. There's a story behind that. Remind me to tell it to you when we have more time. So then I decided to settle down in Santa Cruz, and I found my peace. It's been a beautiful life. I'm not reconnected to my family. I don't think they'll ever be able to understand or accept. They'll just try to say that something's the matter with me. Can't accept someone that makes such a choice. And I haven't seen, she says, a rabbi like you, that looks like you, since I was back in Beis Yaakov so many years ago. But the way she described it, it sounded like she was she moved to California around 69 or 70 or something like that. The good old days. And she says, so this was her question. And you're standing here speaking about God and about Judaism and about soul in this comfortable way, things I never in my life ever heard. Where did you get all this stuff? Is there like a new Judaism out there since I went to the Shia? That was her way she posed the question. So, for Santa Cruz, I decided the answer would be, I said to her, well, let's put it this way. We Jews have this thing called the 613-step program. So, she laughed. She said, okay, I understand. And afterwards, we spent, not just her, a few other people stayed till maybe 2 or 3 in the morning. Yeah, these places, they keep the store open if you just want to hang out. And we spent talking one of these heartfelt discussions, which I remember very vividly. But briefly, what I told her was the following. I said, I don't judge you at all. I don't know what I would have done had I been had the same experiences. I may have rebelled even more intensely. So I'm not here to tell you you did something right or wrong. That's not the point at all. But I will say that what you rejected may have been legitimate, but it wasn't Judaism. What you rejected was half of Judaism. As they say about truth, half the truth is worse than no truth. What you rejected was the body and mechanics of Judaism, but they never taught you the soul of Judaism. And I shared with her a parable that is one of the most beautiful I've ever heard regarding something like this. And that is the story with the nightingale. That when God created the nightingale with a beautiful voice, so the nightingale would sit perched on a branch, serenade into the night. But then the nightingale came complaining. No one's ever happy with all their gifts. And complaining to God and said, look, I thank you for the beautiful voice you gave me. And I mesmerize every creature in the forest with my songs and melody. But from time to time, there are predators and enemies who are looking for a good meal. And they at that point, they're not really interested in a concert. So you need to give me something to protect myself from these predators who are looking for a nice dinner. So God offered the bird a beak. So the bird looked at the merchants, inspected the merchandise, and came back and said, a beautiful bird like me with an ugly nose like that, no. Okay. So God offered the bird a set of claws. And again, the bird looked at the claws, unbecoming. So finally, God said to the bird, okay, I offer you a set of wings. And the bird inspected and looked at the wings and came back and said, I don't understand. You're the master of the universe. You created every creature with such elegance and symmetry, harmony. I have enough body weight to carry with me to escape my enemies. And here you're giving me 2 extra pieces of flesh that will just weigh me down even further. More body weight. So God, of course, said to the bird, no, little bird. These are called wings. In Hebrew, knafayim. Wings. I'll teach you how to use them, and when an enemy comes your way, you'll soar away. These wings will help you fly to places that you could never reach without them. So I told this woman in Santa Cruz, I said, there's no question that Judaism and its laws and rituals and obligations and commandments and mitzvahs, all the names you want to give for it, are more body weight. There's not even a question. If anyone is familiar with Jewish law, especially if you know the details of Jewish law, there's not an area that it doesn't regulate, that it doesn't have an opinion about. How you wake up and how you go to sleep, how you love, how you marry, how you divorce, how you die, how you're born, even how you tie your shoelaces, how you chew, what you eat, when you eat. The list goes on. There's not an area. Trust me, there's no area. Even how you breathe, frankly. You didn't know that one. No, there's no commandment not to breathe. That's not what I was saying. So, if you think about it, it's a lot of... Why would anyone want so much burden? Wherever you turn, another thing you have to do this way, that way, that. Why not just go with the flow by your instinct? So, if you look at it that way, yes, it's a lot of body weight. You could even call it a lot of dead weight. But if you know that a mitzvah comes from the word connection, and that every mitzvah is also a wings. So yes, wings add more body weight, but is there a bird in this world that will reject a pair of wings because it weighs more, because it makes you weigh more? Even a bird on a diet. Not that there are any birds on diets. It's humans that have this diet issue. So the same thing that adds weight also, if you know how to use it, can lift you to places that you cannot reach on your own. And this is true, frankly, for every discipline. People who train, whether it's in athletics, whether it's in music, in art, there's a lot of discipline that's required that's not very enjoyable, but what it creates is very enjoyable. The discipline required to learn musical notes can be very tedious, but what it creates, the result. So if someone were to tell you, here's 100 pounds of stones, carry it across the room and it's yours, we would all reject it. What do you need 100 pounds of stones? But if someone said to you it's 100 pounds of diamonds, you'd say, give me 200. Now, why do 100 pounds of diamonds weigh less than 100 pounds of stones? Not physically, but in your feelings they do, because it pales in comparison to the value that you get. And you don't even think about the exertion. So it's not that people are concerned or afraid of exerting or working hard at something. If you know what you're getting out of it is greater than what you've invested. This is true about anything that is valuable in life. Unfortunately, what happens is if you only hear the investment part, and you don't appreciate, you just see the body weight and you don't see the wings, then of course, why would you continue? The only reason you'd continue is either out of guilt, or out of fear, or out of not wanting to be a nonconformist and breaking away, or the list goes on. So I told this woman, let me just tell you the end of this story before I go back to what we're discussing here. I said, if you really want to be if you really have guts, and you want to be a real free spirit, I suggest, I have to say this, that you move back to Borough Park, and you open up a little boutique, and you teach other 17-year-olds what they didn't teach you. Anyway, and no, she did not accept my suggestion, just for the record. I'm still working on her. From time to time I send her an email reminding her about my idea. I'd like to see what would happen. It would be quite interesting. I'm sure she'd be excommunicated, but and I've been telling her that I've already, since we're closer, I'm able to say to her, look, sometimes maybe you become very spiritual, but it's right now all about you. And there's a thing called spiritual arrogance and selfishness as well, which we shall discuss, which is that it's about you and your growth. And how is anyone else benefiting in this world from it? So I'm waiting for a response on that one. I hope I didn't insult her. I said it in a nice way, so don't get the wrong impression. I'll tell you the story because it illuminates the story of so many people's lives today. It's maybe her particular story, but I've seen this so many times, and just playing itself out with different names and different characters, different places, and different ways. The fact is, of the 5-6 million Jews in the United States, most who get that type of bankrupt bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah lessons, what can you expect more when Judaism is taught in this completely irrelevant, at best historical way, but you don't find spiritual vitality in it? So what do you expect? People are not going to reject that. Who? You have to either be, as I said, a cultish figure, or someone who just wants to gravitate to a group, or some other programmed situation to accept it. Now, what about all those that grow up in traditional homes, like myself, and so I can talk firsthand. I can tell you most of it is usually mechanical. Not to say that it's bad people or they're doing bad things, but a lot of it is very mechanical and very programmed, and hopefully carries some people, but many cannot handle that. So you'll find there's a compartmentalization going on. There are people who are so-called very religious on the front, on the surface. Beneath the surface is another story that no one's going to tell you about. So it brings me to the core issue, the core question. And let's look at this from the perspective of the Talmud. The Talmud has a fascinating story that I'm sure many of you are familiar with, and maybe you've heard it so many times. But it's on one hand, a very nice story, but also filled with all kinds of questions. The story goes of the potential convert who came to see Hillel, the sage Hillel, and asking him to teach him the entire Torah standing on one foot. Most of you familiar with the story? I'll tell it regardless. And Hillel responds. What does he say? In Aramaic, Ma da'olach sani lechavercha lo yisavik. That which you dislike, sani in Aramaic, that which you hate or dislike, do not do unto your chaver, to your friend. It's the negative expression of what we'd say in positive, love thy neighbor as yourself. Don't do unto others that which you don't dislike, which means to do unto others that which you do like. But it's stated in the negative. Then Hillel concludes, and this is the most powerful conclusion, he says, because what the guy's asking him to teach him the entire Torah standing on one foot, so Hillel says, this is the entire Torah. Zui kol ha-Torah kula ve'idach perusha zil gemar. This is the entire Torah, and everything else is commentary. That's where we get the expression, the rest is commentary, from this Talmudic statement. The rest is commentary on this one line, don't do unto others as you wouldn't do unto yourself. Now, this sounds beautiful. The golden rule, love thy neighbor, love everyone unconditionally, as you love yourself, etc. But if you think about it, the story is fraught with questions. Hillel's statement is not simple at all. First of all, when anyone who looks into the Torah, maybe this convert who just learned that standing on one foot didn't look into the Torah yet, but the rest of us who do look into it, and maybe when he would, the Torah, this Bible here, when you open it up, I'd like you to show me how many verses are about not doing something that you dislike to another. As a matter of fact, in the Torah there are two types of commandments. There's the category called Ben Adam Lachaver, that which a human being, human to human, peer to peer, mitzvahs. That's like do not steal, do not murder, charity, kindness, compassion, visiting the sick, inviting guests. That's good. That fits into the category that Hillel said, because it's all under the one umbrella that don't do unto others that which you don't want done to yourself. But then there's a whole other half of the Torah, which is called Ben Adam Lamokim, between man and God, between the human being and God. And this includes the laws of kosher and the laws of Shabbos and the holidays and prayer and in the times of the temple offerings and the laws of purity and impurity. And the list goes on there too. And this all is between you and God. It has nothing to do with how you behave with others. So how could Hillel say the entire Torah is all under one statement, the way you interact with others, with love, and not to hurt them just like you don't want to be hurt? This is question number one. Question number two is there are many people who keep the Torah, and we don't necessarily find that they're more loving. There are people who adhere to every iota and detail, and you don't find them to be more compassionate, more sensitive, more loving. And they do unto others that which they don't want done to themselves. And there's a empirical proof for that. I'm not here to judge anyone, I'm not here to bring up any names, so it's not in the category of Lashon Hara. But this is an empirical fact. So Hillel is making a statement that, number one, as I said, how do you explain that? The whole Torah, there's a lot of the Torah that doesn't have anything to do with human interrelationships. And on the other hand, there are many people who keep the Torah and it doesn't necessarily follow that rule. And finally, there are many people who don't keep the Torah, at least on an ostensible level. And they're very compassionate and loving to another person. So Hillel's statement at the outset sounds very poetic and beautiful, and standing on one foot the whole Torah, but in practice, what does it mean? Now it should be noted that the story didn't begin with Hillel, that actually the convert first went to another scholar, a colleague of Hillel's. His name was Shammai. And Shammai, who was in a way much more not so sensitive, or I would say more stringent, not a bad man, but his approach was much more by the letter of the law. And Shammai said to this man who asked to be taught the Torah standing on one foot, he was thrown out of his academy. He said, that's a ridiculous question. It's like someone would come to you, teach me the entire wisdom of the world standing on one foot. What should a true master do when someone says that? So Shammai said that it's such an attitude, you're not going to learn anything. Hillel, who was more sensitive, did make this statement. But as I said, the statement is filled with questions. So what is the answer to all these questions? And there lies the biggest issue of all. What exactly is religion? And what exactly is the Torah? And how does it work based on what Hillel said? If Hillel made that statement, how does it practically work? So there's a book called the Tanya. You may have heard of the book called the Tanya. The Tanya is it's not a short book, but it's relatively short based on the content in it. One of the great colleagues of the author of the Tanya said when he saw the Tanya, he would marvel at the fact that this Rebbe was able to take such a great God and put him into such a small book. That's the way he put it. So in the Tanya, which is written by Rosh Shneur Zalman of Liadi, called the founder of the Chabad Hasidic approach, he has a chapter 32. 32 in Hebrew is the chapter Lev. Lev in Hebrew, Lamed Beis, which could also be read as love, is chapter 32 in Tanya, talks about love. He talks about the unconditional love that people have to each other. And in one line, 2 lines, he answers this whole statement of Hillel in the most profound way. What he says there is the following. He says, love, what is the definition of love? So the way the Tanya puts it, you can look it up, but it's very brief, I'm going to elaborate. He says, love is the transcendence of spirit over matter. The way he puts it, nafshe ikeh v'gufei tafel. When spirit dominates over matter, love is the dominance of spirit over matter. Now let me explain what that means before we continue. Many of us, if you ask the correct definition of love, most of us would say love. Some would say love is intimacy, companionship, the need that human beings have to feel nurtured, warm, feel that you are cared about, taken care of. Obviously it has a sexual dimension to it. I mean, there are many definitions to love in the fullest sense of the word. But overall, most people would say it's a need. What is love? It's a human need. It's the need to have all that love brings you. It's not a need in the same way like a tangible need like food, which has physical or tangible properties. But it's nevertheless a human need. Children from birth and throughout our lives, we're in need of love. And when we don't have it, we feel deprived and something's missing. Sometimes it could be the biggest thing missing in your life. You could have everything else and you don't have love. Nothing can compensate for it. But the definition really has to be analyzed, because if love was so easily definable, obviously everyone would be able to master it, and the fact is nobody's mastered it. And there are more poems and books and ideas written about love, or the search for love, than any other theme in life. What is the Torah's definition for love? And to go back to the Tanya's definition, is that it's not just another need. There's an element of it that is actually the opposite of a need. And I'll share with you, a couple came to me, counseling, and they had many issues between them, and they were really ready to part ways. I guess they came to me as a last resort, not that I knew what to do for them, but maybe they thought I did. So of course I went through with them all the usual, we reviewed all the usual suspects in any relationship stuff. I'm not going to go through that list right now. And then I asked them if they've went to therapy. Yeah, many different types of therapy. Most of it didn't really work. And the only therapy that then I like pushed them, I wanted to hear if anything worked, after all these years. And they were married, I think, 11 years. And they said to me that the only therapist that did somewhat reach something or help them get beyond some impasse was this woman therapist who had them do the following exercise. Now you got to follow this; it's very complicated. I mean, just doing this exercise can definitely keep you from fighting because it's so overwhelming. Maybe that was her intention. So, what was the exercise? She had them both. I'm just making sure I remember because it was very. She had them both list on a piece of paper all the needs that they have. Okay, so he listed his needs, she listed her needs separately. Then she had them categorize the needs from 1 to 10, how important those needs are. Most important need is 1, least important, or maybe the other way around. Most important need is 10, least important is 1. 5, in between. Then she had them list another column, which said, and these needs, how much from 1 to 10 are they fulfilled by your partner? So 10 would be completely fulfilled, and 1 would be barely fulfilled. So you get the drift of this. And so that's the thing. Then came another new series of lists, and that is, what do you think you're doing for your partner? And again, 1 to 10. And then, of course, began the comparisons. They started comparing lists and seeing that she thought she's doing 10, he thinks she's doing 1. She thought this is not an important need to him, he thinks it's the most important need. I mean, it was interesting, actually. And they said that it really helped them understand many things. They said it was quite complicated, but at least it helped them think. He never knew that she really cares that much about him squeezing the toothpaste from the middle of the tube. It was like up there. And when they discussed it, it's a metaphor, but when they discussed it, he said, it's not squeezing, it's the principle of the matter, As men are so good at. So, anyway, I said, so what happened? So why are you here? Why didn't it work? So they said, well, we had these lists. She had a list on the refrigerator. He had his on a bulletin board. He says, we were like our lives became like walking through a minefield. Every time I did something, I kept running to the list. Oh, I forgot that's so important. And this thing and that thing. They're looking at lists, and they said life became impossible. It was no longer a relationship. They were just looking at lists, and then they became, impossible to follow this type of approach. Even though on paper it was all really a good way of analyzing it all. So back to square one. The fights began again. So I said to them, well. It came to me at that moment. I said, I'm going to ask you to make another list. I know it was hilarious. So they said, do me a favor, enough of the lists. So I said, no, this list is going to be a completely different list. Here I'd like you to both write down, what do you give to this relationship? And I know no 1 to 10s. Just make a list. What do you bring to this relationship? All this is about needs. And just a question whether it's a 1 need or a 10 need. And a question whether you're getting 1 out of 10 of your need fulfilled. What about, what are you bringing to this relationship? And I must say that at the moment they didn't know what I was talking about, I have to tell you, because they were not ready for that. My point was not the list, of course, it was an attitude. But today they're happily married, and it definitely turned around there, because they had to go into a whole process of relearning what love was. Their whole expectations were off. They thought it's about needs. And not due to any malicious reasons. That's what they grew up with. That's what most of us grow up with. It's about needs. I have this need, that need, that need. The secret of all love is not about needs. It's about giving. It's about offering. And you think, okay, what does that mean? Sacrificing yourself because I don't get anything in return? No, the answer is when you give, you get your needs met, but not directly. It's indirect. So we're not talking about compromising, annihilating yourself. It's the strength to be able to give. To give takes a lot more strength than to take. What is that? What did that train robber and the Frisco kid say when he jumped off the train? And he robbed everybody of their belongings. He says, remember, it's always better to give than to take. And then he proceeded to take all their jewelry. But the fact of the matter is, when you give, you build confidence, because then you learn you're a person that's able to give, and not become less. And many people hoard, and don't know how to give because that's their way of being secure, by holding on to things. So this is a big discussion of its own. It's really not the theme of this evening directly, but in some ways it is. So I want to go back to the Tanya's interpretation of love as opposed to what the biologists and the therapists may tell you. Tanya's interpretation of love is all about giving. How can one human being love another is the big question when self-love is always the most dominant force in life. Self-interest. Can a person truly love another human being like themselves? The answer is yes, if you get something that's worth it. I'll love you because I get in return something that's worth it from me. So then it's really about loving yourself. You love yourself so much, you're ready to do something for another because you get something that's an extension of yourself. Some cynics would even say love is all about extension of yourself. Another person loves you, that means you're so special that you can be, like the guy who goes on a date and talks in 2 hours about himself. And then he turns to the girl and says, okay, enough about me. Now what do you think about me? Guys usually don't put it quite in those terms, but so there's like two halves to the date. First is his perspective on himself, and then it's her perspective on it. Okay, so and this is all in the name of open communication. So the Tanya says in one expression, he says, love is because if we were just bodies, two stones cannot love each other. Maybe they can in their own way, we can understand it, but they have no connection. Two inanimate bodies, I always use the word two corpses, have nothing to connect them. If anything, the material world divides us. One piece of food is eaten by you cannot be shared with someone else unless you're going to have less of it. And the same is with money, and the same thing is with your space. You want someone to sit in your seat, you're going to have to stand up and give them your seat. There's no way the two people can sit in the exact space, because materialism, by definition, is parameters of inflexible time and space. Everything that occupies a certain moment or a certain space occupies it entirely, unless it gives it up. So yes, you could argue, I'll give up my space, but I won't have it, but I'll get something in return. That's fine. But love cannot be driven by that. How are two people able to love each other? Because they have something that's not just physical. They have a soul. And the soul does not occupy time and space. So two people can sit near each other and hate each other. And there are other two people who could be 1,000,000 miles apart, and they're like one. And time and space melts away. They say mothers feel sometimes children that way. But the point being that love has nothing to do with the physical. It manifests in the physical. Of course, you hug someone you love. You kiss someone you love. You can be physically intimate with someone you love. But it doesn't begin on the body level. It begins on the soul level. Because there's a connection. That's why you express yourself through a kiss, through a hug, through a physical, say, I love you expression. But the meaning of it is a completely transcendental one. And that's what he says in Tanya in one line, in the most brilliant way. He says, love is when the transcendence of spirit over matter. That means it's not your matter, your body, that's defining the rules. It's your soul that is. Unfortunately, we live in a material world, and our souls are trapped in our bodies. You could say even hostage in our bodies. And the body has a lot to say about love, so it hijacks love, basically. In other words, if love was purely on the soul's terms, it would be a complete giving thing, and it would be completely transcendent. But because the soul is inside of a body as well, the body comes and says, well, I have some needs that need to be fulfilled. And it can hijack, and it can disturb the momentum of a transcendental experience. But there's nothing new. That's what life is all about in the first place. This struggle between matter and spirit in that fashion. So now let's go back to Hillel's statement, as he explains in Tanya there. It goes like this. Torah is the same idea. Torah equals one word, transcendence. The reason the Torah was given to us, its function, its purpose in our lives is to teach us to transcend matter and to reach a place of spirit. And every mitzvah in the Torah is that way, Hillel is saying. Not just the obvious mitzvahs where you're doing a loving gesture to someone, you reach out with a helping hand to a needy person, or you visit someone that is sick, or other acts of compassion and love. That's obvious acts of love. But even when you keep Shabbos, and you eat kosher, and yes, you pray When there's nothing else going on except you and God, what is it all about? It's about transcending your material, narcissistic, and selfish inclinations and reaching a place of transcendence. Why do we keep Shabbos? So many people, and I know this from some of so-called, I don't like the word orthodox, but will say Shabbos is a day when you do nothing. 6 days a week I'm busy, active, making money, this and this. Shabbos I do nothing. And then, when Shabbos ends, we go back to life. Which led me to develop a theory that I've not yet fully confirmed, but the concept of Saturday night fever, why Saturday night became a party night. So maybe it's a bunch of repressed Jews that just were doing nothing Shabbos, and they just broke out on Shabbos night. It was once called Mitzvah Shabbos, became Saturday night. Check that out. We got to study the history of Saturday night activity. We'll Google it tonight. What?
Jonathan Travolta.
Okay. Right. But before Jonathan Travolta. Very Jewish name. Yeah. So, what is Shabbos? Shabbos is transcendence in this sense. The way the Zohar puts it is like this. That 6 days of the week, the soul immerses in bodily activities, and often gets obscured there. And on Shabbos, the soul goes back to its natural place, and therefore tries to suspend, or at least minimize as much as possible, material and mechanical activity. Think of it this way. If you were to close your eyes and ears and taste, touch, and smell, it means your 5 senses, your sensory tools. You can try it if you like. But just keep your ears open so you can hear what I'm going to say. Or do it in your own time. What are you going to be left with? Your sensory tools are shut off, shut down. What are you going to be left with? So initially the thought may be terrifying. You'll disappear. No. What you're going to be left with is the real you. That's not being stimulated by the senses. You try it out in your private moment, and you'll see how distracted and seduced we are by our senses. Now, I'm not saying senses are a bad thing. The sensory world has much beauty to it. But it also can be a completely hypnotic, seductive experience that takes you away from yourself. So being stimulated by sight, sounds, taste, touch, and smell is going to take you away from something. And that's going to be the real you. Because you, your essence, your soul, does not need eyes to see itself, and does not need ears to hear itself, and does not need taste, touch, and smell to experience itself. It just doesn't. You need eyes to see others, ears to hear what others have to say, and so on. It's interacting. There are channels between you. If we had no senses, we'd be self-contained individuals that would have no interaction with anything around us. So that's also not the objective. So in a way, if you think of Shabbos, Shabbos is really trying to get to a place where there's the least amount of material stimulation, basically. Where you're not immersing in the regular, even good things. No one suggested a job is a bad thing necessarily. Or making money is bad, or traveling, or other mechanical 39 malachas, the 39 types of work that the Torah delineates. They're all actually work that's based on the work that was done in the temple. So clearly they are all sacred types of work. But there's work and there's work. There's inner work and there's outer work. There's your inner voice and there's your outer voice. And 6 days is immersion in the outer. And 1 day is return to the inner. With the objective to take that inner experience and bring it now to the outer the rest of the days of the week. That's why you don't have 6 days Shabbos on one weekday, which would have been nice maybe. But you have 6 days weekday and 1 day Shabbos, because the purpose is not to stay in the cocoon of your soul. It's to enter into, immerse into, and engage the world around you, but with the spirit of what's within. If you think of it that way, Shabbos as a whole is an unbelievable opportunity. It's an opportunity to reignite, reconnect to your essence. And there are methods for this. Again, this is not the theme of this evening's discussion. It's something that can be elaborated upon. But you see here, our Shabbos, which is completely between you and God, is about transcendence. It's about not being so trapped and enslaved to your material life. And many people who've tried out Friday night and so on are surprised at how addicted we are to that world. That's why it's so difficult. Now, does it make complete sense? Well, you can justify and find all kinds of ways to say maybe I can do it anyway, I go on a spiritual hiatus, but the fact is Shabbos remains a transcendent experience. So now let's go back to the Hillel statement. So when Hillel said the entire Torah is love, he's basically saying the entire Torah is transcendence. Shabbos, kosher, and even the laws that have nothing to do with how humans interact with each other. So now comes the big question. If that's the case, so anyone keeping Shabbos should be a more transcendent human being. Anyone who's so-called more religious, more committed, more traditional, should be a more sensitive human being, a more compassionate human being. Is that the case? Who said no? I agreed. No, I just said that. I thought everybody would say no. Everybody together. No. So how do we explain this paradox? Well, so here comes down to the bottom line. That maybe you have two ways to go. Just to be fair, you could either argue that being more Torah-driven, more committed to Torah, doesn't make you more refined, which would be, of course, a ridiculous type. Who would want to choose that then? Or you could say that maybe these people who so-called religious are not really religious. Not everybody who keeps Shabbos is Shabbosdik, as they say. Not everybody who eats kosher is kosher. Meaning, you can do the actions mechanically, going back to that story from the women in Santa Cruz, and it becomes, you could also teach a monkey to eat chalent on Shabbos, and to put on tefillin, and light Shabbos candles. Now, I'm not trying to take away from anyone that does things mechanically. Maybe better mechanical than not. Shalei l'shma, bo l'shma. Habits that are good, even if they're not necessarily full of spirit and passion, so at least a habit, maybe you'll grow into it. But I can tell you, personally, from personal experience, many people that I know, that have grew up in very strict and very severe religious environments, their rebellion was because they were trapped by this mechanics. And at some point said, what's going on? Does anybody think there's something behind this? I remember, I think I shared this story here. I'll tell you the name of who it happened with in a moment. I met with him. He had written me a beautiful note about Torah Meaning for Life, my book. And so I went to see him. And he told me these words. He said, when I was 9 years old, I went to synagogue with my father in Montreal. And it was like a morning minyan or something. And he knocked off the davening, he said, maybe in 15 minutes. And he couldn't believe how fast everyone went. So he said to his father, and his father was fluent in Hebrew. He said, Dad, did you understand what you just read? So he said, no. But don't worry, no one else does either. So this boy he's not a boy anymore. This man tells me, not only he told me not to worry, I began worrying then, and I never went back to synagogue again. That's what everyone's doing. He would have accepted. His father said, I don't understand it, but others do. If you study it, To him was, why are you doing this? He said, I left not just the synagogue, I left Judaism. I did many things that were far from Jewish. And he said, when I was around 45 or 49, I think, he said, I began to explore again. And I discovered that there is something else. Not that I fully discovered. And I decided to commit my life to make sure that other 9-year-olds don't experience that. The man's name is Edgar Bronfman Sr. He told this to me personally in the meeting in his office at the Seagram building on Park Avenue. I'm just not getting into what kind of man he is, whether you like him or you don't like him. But one thing for sure, he put his money where his mouth is. He brought the Swiss banks to their knees and did some other good things for the Jewish people. I think he was the initiator of the first monies for Birthright, which has brought, I don't know how many, thousands and thousands of Jewish boys and girls to Israel. So he's a man that doesn't just talk about it. He actually paid. And he asked me, actually, what would you do to make sure 9-year-olds don't go through that? So I answered without even a question. I said to him, if there's no soul to the prayer, there's no prayer. Everyone's going to experience what you experience. There will be people who hold on to it simply because, as I said, out of guilt, or out of tradition, or out of obligation, or, Yom Kippur, you got to do something, you have to be Jewish, whatever the reason is. But many will not. Not everyone is just so nice, and not everyone is just going to go along because they feel Jewish about it. So, all this, I want to bring back now to why am I discussing it, besides that the relevance of this topic. And to me, it's maybe the most important topic about Judaism altogether. What is Judaism? I can tell you what I'm sharing with you tonight is things that most Jews simply do not know, including traditional Jews. Some will even say what I say is sacrilegious. They'll say, what's wrong with mechanical Judaism? Some will tell you. But I'm not talking, this is not my theories. This is black and white biblical stuff, and here's where it's grounded in this week's chapter. Vayeira, Elov Hashem, the Torah begins this week. God appears to Abraham. He appears to Abraham to visit him because Abraham had just circumcised himself. So from here we learn the mitzvah of visiting the sick, by the way. Because many of the mitzvahs, we emulate God's ways. God was compassionate, you be compassionate. Mahu mavakachel, God is visiting the sick, visiting Abraham, healing from the circumcision. So too do we do the same. Then we learn another mitzvah from this beginning of the chapter, inviting guests to our table. The mitzvah of Ichnas Sarchim is from this chapter. Well, how do we know? So it continues. God appeared to Abraham, and they were communicating in their own way. Abraham lifts his eyes, the Torah continues, and he sees, from the distance, he sees 3 strangers traveling in the wilderness, in the desert. So he turns away from God, and he goes to greet the strangers. So the Talmud derives from this. Not only the mitzvah of greeting guests, strangers, even if they're strangers, but even greater than that. That greeting guests are greater than spending time with God. Because Abraham didn't just sit there and nothing was happening, and he went to greet them. That itself would be a lesson in greeting guests. Even though he was healing, could barely move or whatever it was, he could have waited till they came to him. He went out to greet them. It goes further. He turned away from God, which one considered to be quite insulting. In the middle of a conversation with a human being, so 3 strangers. I'm also human. Why are you turning away from me? And this is God. God doesn't appear every day to somebody. And it's not because God said anything offensive or anything like that. They were having this pleasant conversation. Well, Abraham decides he has something else to do, which is go greet these guests. Very nice, very virtuous. But, he should have said to God, excuse me, may I go, or something like that. So we learn from this, as the Talmud says, that greeting guests is greater than Gdela Hachnos Sarchim Mekabolas Pnei Ashchina is the expression. That Hachnos Sarchim, greeting guests, is greater than receiving God. So here's the big question. We know this from Abraham, but how did Abraham know? He didn't have this lesson from anyone. We learned it from Abraham. Where did Abraham know to do this? How did he have this chutzpah? Well, here's part of the greatness of this pioneer. Because he was a truly godly person, that's how he knew that's what he should do. Now you could say if he's a truly godly person, he should have been spending more time with God instead of turning. Because God created human beings. And as one of the Rebbes puts it, if you don't love human beings, you don't love God. Because you love what your beloved loves. God loves the people he created. So if you don't like them, you're in effect saying, I don't like God. God put them here. This doesn't mean, just for the record, just as a footnote, does not mean that we have to agree or love everything a person does, even if you love them unconditionally. We all make mistakes. Your child comes home and made a big mistake. You still love that child unconditionally. That doesn't mean there shouldn't be discipline. There shouldn't be clear boundaries explaining that this is not appropriate, etc. So, the message is this in this context. Abraham was a godly person. He wasn't a religious person. If he was bound to religion, so-called religious dogma and rules, the argument can go. He's in the middle of talking to God. He's in the middle of praying. He's in the middle of communing with the divine. No time for lowly human beings, especially strangers, nomads, Arabs, whatever they were called. That would be seemingly the right attitude of a religious person. And good and all the justification. God, I'm with God right now. What you learn from this is that being more committed to religion and law, it means you're more committed to human beings and you're more compassionate and more sensitive. And if you see someone who's adhering to Jewish law, Torah, and is not more compassionate, there's something fundamentally missing. It's not a detail that's missing. It's missing the essence of what the Torah was all about. Someone that keeps Shabbos and eats kosher and does all the laws should be equally committed to be the sensitivity that those transcendent laws should bring them to. So how is it possible? What happened exactly? So what happened to Judaism? How was it hijacked like that? The answer is that even the people who so-called call themselves religious or act that way themselves don't even know what I just said. It's not like they know that they're supposed to be more compassionate or more sensitive. They too are part of the same assimilation that we're all trapped in. The lack of understanding what Judaism really is. Even though you read the stories of Abraham and so on, it's become detached. And it's very easy, in a busy world, to become mechanical. Very easy. You grow up with something, you just do it by habit. And you don't even necessarily intentionally mean to be hurtful. But then a culture is created out of it. And once a culture is created out of it, you have the condescension, and you have the judgment, and you have all that we find today that religious people do to so-called those that they don't see as part of their own fault. There was a guy in this class, I remember when we were on the Upper West Side, very, as secular as it gets, knew nothing about Judaism. This was his only connection. He was coming to study every week. He actually worked at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. He was a very funny guy. I don't know if you remember. He worked there in the night shift. He was, I think, a guard or something like that. He worked at night, he was overseer. I remember as we were reading the chapters, these were chapters about Lech Lecha and Abraham. He said to me one night, I think, this class is going to be very dangerous because I feel I want to destroy all those idols that has those shadows all night in the Metropolitan. I told him, do me a favor, don't get radical on me here. It's not what we're learning. He meant it humorously. Anyway, so as he began to study, he really loved to study. So he decided to drop into some classes in the Upper West Side. Without mentioning names of which synagogues, he went to a synagogue between Mincha and Ma'ariv. Afternoon and evening service, they had a share there. A Talmud share Daf Yomi. Some people study every day the page of the Talmud. They go through it in a cycle every 7 years. So he sat in there. So first of all, he described to me later what happened. And I was like so embarrassed. And everyone looked at him strange, like, what are you doing here? They didn't say it, but we kept on looking like this. And not that he was in any way inappropriate. He wore a kippah, and he was respectful. He was listening. And then the whole thing to him was like, and he was an intelligent guy. So he asked a question, and then, man, did they give it to him? And he left. He wasn't even. He didn't even know to be humiliated. That's how bad it was. I was humiliated for him because I knew where they were coming from. And he said to me, "What's with these guys? What were they doing? Was this like a secret group talking like in code?" Because he said also they were arguing about these details when I asked them something. So, I would have liked to tell them that, this is a secret. There's some mystics or something like that, and you have to go to the mikveh for 400 days before you join such a group. They're on the most refined level you've ever met, but I didn't want to do that either. But I remember I didn't say much. I just, I said to him, maybe you have to find another class, and maybe you run by me before you go into these shuls, So, what disturbed me was going to a house of God, studying the Torah of God, and you feel like it's a country club that either you belong, you don't belong. What is that? What's the message? The message is that either God discriminates, or these people are all screwed up, and they think that that the Torah belongs to them. You know why the Torah was given in a wilderness? Why wasn't it given? The God's great gift, treasure. It's called in the Torah, Chem de Gnuza, God's secret treasure. If you want to give someone a gift for their birthday or any gift, what do? You take them to a nice environment, like a good restaurant, nice ambiance, and you bring them a beautiful gift. Here, think of it this way. God takes the Jewish people, takes them out of the beautiful architecture of Alexandria and other cities in Egypt, and doesn't take them to Jerusalem or to Athens or to other beautiful towns. Instead, takes them to this hot wilderness. No one documented what the temperature was that day. Interesting, everything is the weather, what the weather is like. What was the temperature that morning when they received the Torah? Well, it must have been pretty hot, if you go there these days. And in an uncomfortable wilderness, where there's no water to drink, and a hostile environment, God gives them this great gift. Now, most of us, that's the only thing you remember, would we remember how uncomfortable it was. That's not documented. The only thing we know is that the Torah was given. If you read it, you don't even know where it was given. It sounds like it was the most beautiful, comfortable type of air-conditioned environment. So, the answer the Medrash gives for this is a very beautiful and powerful answer. It has to do with copyright law. Had the Torah been given in any city, till this day, the residents of that city would be claiming royalties every time we had a Torah class. Which means, I don't know if we would be giving this Torah class. If they could agree who really the residents are, but that's another story. But what I mean to say is, simply put, that God did not want anyone to lay claim on it. So he gave it in a place that's called no man's land. Both in halacha, Jewish law, and in legal law, constitutional law. The desert is not, if you lose something in the desert, no one can lay claim because it's not private property. So basically the Torah does not belong to any human beings. So to go back to the lessons from Abraham, so number one is, as the story goes with the same Balatanya I mentioned, so his son was once immersed in study in his room, and there was a baby fell out of its crib. The baby was crying. The father of this man, called the Mittler Rebbe, his name was Dov Ber, came to him and reprimanded him. He said to him, "You were so immersed in your studies, you didn't hear it, Kael Yelad Boicha, the child, cry of a child." So you'd think he should have complimented him. He's so immersed and engrossed in his studies, and so connected to God, he's oblivious of anything around him. Telephone ringing, babies crying, whatever it may be. Not that there were telephones then. The answer, he says to the exact opposite. How could you be sitting and studying Torah, and so-called becoming more sensitive and more transcendent, and not hear the cry of a child? A telephone, he'd be forgiven. That would be good, or other distractions that we all have nowadays. But the cry of a child. So what is this? This and many, many other, both laws and stories and incidents and episodes, teach you fundamental lessons that unfortunately are lost today in many ways. And that is that Torah is all about more compassion and more sensitivity. And if someone who's very, very religious in certain rituals and certain strict and zealot in certain rituals is not more sensitive, I have to tell you, he's maybe just as assimilated as someone who doesn't know what Shabbos is. So this one doesn't know how to keep Shabbos, and this one doesn't know what Hillel said, that the entire Torah is about transcendence to become a more sensitive human being. So we're all in the same boat, basically. People are ignorant of different things. I like to believe that there's a blessing in disguise. I remember a woman came to speak to me. She grew up in a traditional, she was from religious, and she was dating a guy that wasn't. He was coming to this class, so she called me to ask me about him, whether she should be serious about this, because he doesn't keep Shabbos, he doesn't, all the traditions she keeps, he doesn't keep. And how she liked him as on a personality level, but she didn't see practically how they're going to live a life that is sharing the same value system. Now, I knew the guy very well, so I told her, look, today he doesn't keep it. How do you know where he's going to be tomorrow? The next day. And I told her what I was taught. That when you're looking for shidduchim or matches, soulmates, first of all, there are no two people who are exactly in the same place in this world anyway. There's no one that's exactly in the same place as you. What you're looking for, I told her, is that at least it shouldn't be going like this. That you're going this direction and he's going in that direction. If you're going like this and he's here, but he's also going the same direction, then you're in the same place. It's just a matter of time. So it's important to know not necessarily what a person is doing today, but what direction they're going. Often I find shidduchim, these matches are split apart because he or she makes a promise and they're not living up to it. You're going to be more religious, less, the whole thing. So relationships are not built on promises. The relationships are built on wanting to fulfill a promise because you love someone. This isn't a contractual thing where, if you don't do it, I'm going to sue you. It's done because you want to do so. But it's really about direction. I don't want anyone to just use this formula blanket. It has to be applied case by case. No two people are alike, which also doesn't mean that everybody who's incompatible is also should be married to each other. So you have to look at each situation case by case. But to just reject it outright, an interesting thing would happen. They did marry. Today, he's more observant than she is. Not that she went the other way, but his soul and heart was there. He just wasn't trained. He didn't know what it was. He didn't know what Shabbos was. And culturally he wasn't used to it. It was a big jump. Now I didn't know that he was going to necessarily be there or not be there. My point was I just knew where his soul was. I knew that he was not misleading. He did sincerely loved, and he was basically more, she was more religious, he was more spiritual. Let's put it that way. And that's why you have this big statistic, where you ask people, in the United States, they have this survey they did, this was documented, that I think 98% of Americans will say that they're spiritual or somewhat spiritual and have some faith in God. 40 or something like that, connect to a religion. Now this isn't a discrepancy, no, a separation of a few points, as the pollsters like to say. This is 50 points. So it's a pretty strong statement. What does that mean? It means that people do not associate religion with being spiritual. Religion is association with a particular denomination, with particular rituals, and so on, whether it's Christian, Jewish, Muslim, so on and so forth, or within Judaism itself, the different denominations. That's what religion is. That's what people define religion as, being associated with a particular type of group, or faith, or rituals. The same is true for conservative, Reform, and Orthodox within Judaism, or Reconstructionists, or the other in-betweens. Spiritual, on the other hand, most people will define with the word spirit. That I've connected spirit, not just the materialistic world, there's something spiritual about it. That too has probably many definitions, but overall, most people say a free spirit, not necessarily connected to any religion. There are many free spirits that are not religious, and then many religious people that are not free spirits. And some say actually religion is you'll find this is a direct contradiction to being a free spirit, because it's all about conforming to the rules. How could you be a free spirit? This is a big distortion of both spirituality and religion. It's true that they were hijacked, but that's not where it was meant to be. You want to have a person that's a perfect model, go to Abraham. You tell me, is he religious or spiritual? I don't think you'll be able to distinguish. It's one and the same. Because you're talking about a godly person who ritual and acts, and the soul within the act is one. And they constantly feed each other. Is it just soul? No, it's not just soul. It comes down to actions, behaviors, disciplines, do's and don'ts. So it's not just amorphous. On the other hand, is it mechanical? Absolutely not. It's completely about higher levels of refinement. And that is a fundamental lesson that you learn from Abraham, maybe the biggest of all, of what we should be like. So where do we stand today? We stand today in a world where it has been unfortunately hijacked. I have to share the story which I've shared so many times because it's just so I think relevant. Where I was in Miami Beach, also in that book tour. In November they have the International Miami Book Fair, okay. And when it's a larger audience, you speak in a Colony Theater on Lincoln Road, if you know the South Beach. So I spoke in that auditorium, and afterwards, someone got up to ask a question. A woman got up to ask a question, and she said the following. This was her words. She said, "I want to know what your opinion is on conservative Judaism, because I hear people like you, meaning me, don't recognize conservative Judaism." Now, for those of you that are unaware, conservative, she meant not as conservative versus liberal, but conservative as versus Orthodox or Reform. So, and she added, of course, she said, "And I don't want to buy the book of a bigot." That was her closing warm words. So, it was a little, she had a little nerve, but frankly, it definitely enlivened the whole situation. And if you know how to use a heckler, it can be very good, actually, to get your points across. I don't know if we'll call her a heckler, but definitely was a challenging question. And the whole place fell very silent, very silent. So clearly the question was on many minds, and they must have thanked her for the one that posed it. So I decided to take advantage of the moment, and I said, yes, it's absolutely true. I don't recognize conservative Judaism. And I put my head down, I remember, and I was quiet. And the place began to hem and haw, and you heard the mumbling, and it was getting louder and louder. And I didn't want to. Before I get stoned, I said, this was a secular audience, but it wasn't exactly very politically correct to make a statement. Yes, I don't recognize conservative Judaism. I am a bigot. Good night. My book is at the door. So I said, then I continued, and I said, but before you get violent, I'd like to add that I also don't recognize Orthodox Judaism. And neither do I recognize Hasidic Judaism, or Conservadox, or Reformadox, or Reconstructionodox, or Jews for Jesus docs, or all the labels and doxes that have been created, that will be created, I'm sure, till the end of time. The reason I don't recognize it, I said, was a very simple reason, is because Judaism has a constitution, just like the United States has a constitution. The constitution of Judaism is called the Torah. And in the entire Torah, I challenge anyone here and any rabbi on earth to find anywhere reference made, or even implied, to Reform, Conservative, Orthodox. You find me that name, we'll talk about it. If it's not in the constitution of Judaism, where did it come from? It came from man-made creation. And I don't want to recognize man-made creations. I mean, there's many country club labels that you can give people. And then I said, I want to reverse the question to her. I turned to her, and I pointed to her. I made sure she should be now in the... You know, if you dish it out, you got to take it. I said to her, let me ask you, let me ask you your opinion. Was Moses Orthodox, Conservative, or Reform? I didn't wait for her to answer. I said, and let's say the soul. What about the soul? Are we born with Orthodox souls, Conservative souls, Reform souls? And what about God? Is God Orthodox, Conservative, or Reform? Is God Jewish or not Jewish? It's a real better question. The answer is that anyone, even with rudimentary knowledge of a soul, a spirit, understands you cannot take a divine spirit, a soul, a non-corporeal soul, and fit it into anthropomorphic and man-made terms. A soul is not green, nor is it square, nor is it rectangle, nor is it tall or short, nor is it made out of wood or metal or subatomic particles, for that matter. A soul has its own definition. The Torah calls a soul a divine image. We say every morning in the prayer, those that pray want to pray. And here again, I challenge any rabbi in the world, even the most radical, fundamentalist, extremist that doesn't recognize anyone Jewish except himself and his wife and his children, to answer this question. That if a Jew, wherever he may be, a Jew who knows nothing about Judaism, keeps no mitzvahs, at least, I mean, there's no such thing as keeping no mitzvahs, but as far as it gets, wants to pray to this morning, tomorrow morning, and does he say the following prayer? Neshama shenasata bi tahirahi, or not? The prayer says, the soul you have given me is pure. So here's the question. You can pose it to any rabbi, the most radical that you know, that so-called don't recognize anyone except themselves. Should someone who's a secular Jew say that prayer, that the soul you've given me is pure? You will not find a rabbi that will be able to answer, no, you shouldn't say it. If I'm a rabbi like that, it's hard to believe. He may say, I don't understand, whatever, but why? Because a soul cannot be taken from you because it wasn't given to you by anyone. So no one can take it from you. Not your parents, not your rabbis, and not the board of the synagogue, and not the synagogue councils of America, and whether conservative, reform, or orthodox. Nobody owns these things. This is the domain of God, just like Torah is the domain of God. And the name Orthodox, conservative, reform, frankly, are distortions and forces of divisiveness from my point of view. I know many people will not like what I'm saying, from all the denominations. Actually, I told the story once in a conservative group, a synagogue. And the conservative rabbi was there. And he wasn't offended, actually. He said to me, so what do you suggest we do? Let's say you're right. Souls are not conservative Orthodox. I said, what I suggest you're not going to accept, and even if you do, your synagogue, your board members won't accept. I would eliminate all these denominations. And let's just start calling people souls. And some souls may be more actualized than others. Obviously, a criminal in prison also has a soul that's pure. But the soul was hijacked, or the soul is locked, trapped. Like any potential is not actualized. We're not saying everybody is a perfect human being. But to name people in those categories, from my point of view, is very divisive. Now I know that some of you in this room or others may say Orthodox doesn't mean a label. Orthodox means believing that God gave the Torah from Sinai. That may be how you see it, but most Jews in the world think Orthodox is some minority party in Israel. They're trying to extort some money from the government for their institution. Or other stereotypes. So it's not always what you think. You may think you have one definition of it. But the labels themselves tend to create divisiveness and definitely distortions. So I would say to us all, I think you should practically discard all our past perceptions or misperceptions, misconceptions of religion, of Torah, of God. I can tell you that most of it is pretty much tainted. I include myself in the bunch because we all grew up with certain ways that people taught it to us. You want to start discovering God and a relationship with God in a true way, understand what Judaism really is. You have to start thinking of it in terms of body and a soul. Yes, Judaism has mechanics, but above all, the mechanics have a soul beneath them. Yes, sometimes we do mechanics even if we don't feel it. Obviously, you love somebody, sometimes you do it out of obligation, automatic pilot, fine. But not only that. What love can thrive if it's only automatic pilot, or only mechanics? And the same is with love with God. Can you love a God, which is also a mitzvah, by the way, to love God, mechanically? Maybe once in a while. Maybe once you've found a connection of true love, so there are times when we're weak, or times we just do it because we're used to it. But if it's only driven by that, you're dealing with a hollow, empty thing that cannot last. It may last for some people, but many will not. The woman in Santa Cruz is not an exception. And I see this as the key, when people look, what is the solution to assimilation, to intermarriage? And everybody comes up with all kinds of studies and findings and so on. So some want to solve it one way, cockamamie way, another way. I'm not here to criticize again, everybody has their way. But let's be honest, unless one understands being Jewish or Judaism and its rituals as a profoundly spiritual journey that resonates with relevance, that is connected and synonymous with respect, with sensitivity, with compassion, with transcendence, with free-spiritedness, what do you expect? What the numbers are going to be? People are going to become more committed to a Judaism that is purely ritualistic, and to say, well, this is a Catholic, they're mechanical Catholics, and here are mechanical Jews. Why do you think that 60% of Buddhists in America are, you guessed it, Jewish? Why? Because why? Because they love Buddhism that much? No, it's because they didn't find it in Judaism. If it's not going to speak to your soul, you're going to look elsewhere. That woman found Zen Buddhism and LSD simply out of a void. Had she found it within Judaism, she wouldn't have to find it elsewhere. I'm not here to knock other systems or other ways, and people, God has His mysterious ways how people find their God, their soul. But our challenge, and this is really why I sit here, is because when I discovered this when I was a teenager, and it didn't come easy, it came with real struggle. I had challenged myself time and again. I looked around, I saw people that were very nice people, but they were either mechanical, or they were leaving it. That's what I was seeing. Or they were just conformists, as I said. That was not very encouraging to see. The only answer I really found was when I looked in the books and I said, one second, there's something here that is not being taught. There's something, what is that, like from alcohol? Am I sounding incoherent or something? I know this may sound sacrilegious, and I'm intentionally using words that may be provocative, because I'll be very honest, I really believe that this is a serious problem. And the problem is not with anyone in this room, it's not with any particular rabbi. I think we're all part victims of a scam. Is that the right word? I don't know if it's any individual, of a swindle, really, of a Judaism that has been fundamentally hijacked from what Abraham first taught. There are glimpses of it, glimmers of it. Trust me, in Borough Park, as in Crown Heights, and elsewhere, you'll find much beauty, great acts of charity, kindness, much of it. Excellent people, too. That's not at all what I'm addressing here. But if you talk about it as an overall system, as to be exported or to be looked at, why do you think Woody Allen movies occur? What do you think Woody Allen was like, knew better? This is what he grew up with, so he conveys that in his films. As does Saul Bellow in his books, as Philip Roth in his books. You go through all of them, this is what they grew up with. Saul Bellows wrote an introduction to the book called The Closing of the American Mind. You remember that book? That was a big hit. sell bestseller. So in his introduction he wrote, and I remember when I read it, I decided to write him a letter. He wrote that his parents had it all figured out for him. He's going to become a cantor or a shaychet aslor, I think a cantor or a or a Talmud teacher in Chicago. That's where he grew up. And then he said, I discovered, freedom or soul, truth, in the Chicago downtown library. Aristotle, Plato, and so on. When I read it, it hurt me very deeply. Not what he wrote personally. That was not. I said to myself, what did they teach? Not to suggest Aristotle, Plato, they're great people, many minds, great minds. But why didn't they teach? Where's the Judaism that he learned? So I wrote him a letter. The letter I wrote him, I was a student at the time. I wrote him a letter saying that I read your thing, and I just wondering if you ever discovered in Judaism any such wisdom. Because if not, I could suggest a few books. I didn't mean it I meant it just in a... So he didn't write back to me, but an assistant of his wrote back to me. This was maybe 1978 or 77. And his assistant wrote back to me that, Mr. Bello appreciated your note. And this, but it was very telling what she wrote to me. She said that he writes that this discussion may have been relevant back then, but after what he's gone through, it's very difficult for him to go back there. Which was very honest, actually. He didn't say, no, it's not true, you're a closed-minded Jew, or whatever it was. It was interesting. It was like almost, and then, I don't know, when he just died at 20 years or 15 years. But these are one of hundreds, thousands of Jewish intellectuals, thinkers, who are brilliant, no question, but they were taught what the woman in Santa Cruz was taught. So we're left with, they rejected something, only half the story. So when you look at Abraham, and it doesn't even take much to look, you see his story, the compassion, his open home. He even prays for the infidels. Tell me what religious fundamentals have to say about that. This week's chapter, what am I talking about? In this week's chapter, when God says Sodom, the wicked city of Sodom, will be destroyed for their actions, for their wicked behavior. What does this Abraham do? You'd think he should be dancing. Finally, they're getting their due. Criminals, cruel, unjust, justice is being done. He turns to God and says to him, that people will say, that the judge of the universe is not doing justice. Because maybe there are a few righteous people in this town. And as a matter of fact, God anticipated that Abraham would challenge him, because God says, should I hide the fact that I'm destroying the city from my beloved Abraham? And he chooses not to hide it from him. And then God knows that Abraham will challenge him. Tell me, how do you explain a religious person taking on the cause of a wicked city? And now that Abraham was naive, he knew what was going on there. He found every way to preserve them, because his God and his spirituality dictated that you become more sensitive. You don't become vindictive. And so how do you look at a criminal? How do the eyes of an Abraham look at a criminal? Does that mean that Abraham would also pray for Hitler and the Nazis? Obviously not. It means you pray for the soul of the person. There's sometimes people make mistakes and they deserve what they get. Not mistakes, malicious, intentional sins. But it never makes you a hateful person. It's not because they are not doing what you want. It's not about you. It's about what's right and what's wrong. It was not a personal thing. It wasn't like, oh, we're in the club and you're outside of the club, so therefore you deserve to be judged and condescended upon. Abraham was praying for the souls of the people and knew that everybody can do tshuva and there's always hope. And then just God said no, so he destroyed the city. And when he destroyed it, you don't laugh, but you cry. When the angels began singing praise, when the Egyptians were drowning in the sea, the Red Sea, you'd think, great, they're singing praise. These Egyptians were like Nazis. They were killing Jews. They enslaved them for so many years. They were completely deserving of what they got. They came to pursue the Jews. It wasn't just that they were being punished. So God says, Talmud tells us, my creatures are drowning in the sea and you are singing songs? What was the statement? What they deserve, you should be crying. That human beings could fall to that point that there's no choice but to drown them. That they became so cruel that they could not even tolerate the Jews would have a moment of freedom. So does that? It's sensitivity. It's all about transcendence. So to sum up, what all this means personally for us is that Judaism is a unbelievably wealthy treasure of transcendent wisdom that can teach all of us how to become more loving, more kind, sensitive. And it's not exclusive from the mitzvahs, it's directly through that. But to do that, you have to fuse the body and soul of the mitzvah. It's not just enough to sit at a Shabbos table and to do it by mechanically. You sing the same songs every Friday night, and then you fall asleep at the same place, and then you eat the same shalom, and then Shabbos ends, and the next week all over again. This is what many people grow up with. It has to be infused with passion and vitality. And the same thing with the rest of it. This is for people who are doing the traditions. One of the ways to do this is maybe an interaction between the spiritual people in this world and the religious people in this world. I actually have my mischievous side likes to bring those two worlds together because it often creates a little tension, but also, in many cases, it creates also something interesting. Obviously, if either of them are too extreme, it's not going to work well, because we also have today fanatic atheists and fanatic believers who personalize everything. But if you're talking to people who are more or less open to hearing ideas, it's not a bad mix to bring some so-called spiritual individuals and some so-called religious individuals. Everyone can learn from each other. And maybe that's why I said before, everything is a blessing in disguise. We live in this confused world where spirituality and religion have become very, very far apart. And maybe the reason is because each of us can learn something from each other. And I will say that on a personal note, a big driving force of why I sit here, and I've been sitting at this, not at this table, but at tables like this for many years now, for over 25 years, Wednesday night, is because I am driven by this need. And once I saw it, it was very clear to me that not to do something about it, if you have the ability, is itself a injustice. And I feel that if I conveyed some of this heartfelt feelings of mine to you, then I hope you're also feeling the same boat now, and that you can't get off the hook because you have to do now the same. Now, I'm not here to recruit, nor to compel you to do anything. You do whatever you want to do, but I don't think that there's a greater gift in life than if you have something that is illuminating. The greater gift to be able to share it with others. And I personally have been enriched in the process, because it's not just about me sharing as if I know it all and others don't. It's a two-way street. There's things I've learned, and when you open up the door of the soul, what happens is souls begin to communicate to each other one way or another. So it's true, I've been doing the speaking here this evening most of the time, well, almost all the time, to be honest. But at the same time, if you think you're not speaking at all, you're mistaken. I can tell you, as someone who's taught many times, I know I speak, but I try to really absorb the vibes from all of you. And the fact is, if you get yourself out of the way, sometimes speaking and listening is a little confusing. Sometimes the ones that are silent are doing more speaking than the ones that speak, if you know what I'm saying. If it sounds like ridiculous, well then forgive me for being a little crazy this late. No, it's not so late. But my point being is that when people speak from the heart to each other, it's not always very clear who's doing the giving, who's doing the receiving. So I do want to thank all of you, not just this evening, overall, for everything I've learned. As I said earlier, or I said other times, we're all like musical notes playing together a grand symphony. And if we each can, if I play my note well, it will help you play your note better, and your note better will help my note. And we all need each other, because we need each other both individually and collectively, because the more individual you are and more sensitive you are to your own voice, the more powerful our voices can join together. That's what music is about. Fierce individuality, at the same time, fierce connection. And it doesn't require conformity, nor does it require annihilation of any individual. It really is a joint thing, and in a sense, the individual enhances the group. So I want to thank everyone for that, and I want to also invite you in any way, since we're now at this new space that we've gotten here, as I've shared with some of you, that please see the space as yours, just as it is mine, which means an environment, a platform for anything, that anything goes, that at least if it's not offensive. So if you have any ideas for programming or how to use this space, please, by all means, intend to be not just for lectures and classes. This class is going many years, so it's I guess a springboard for many other events. But I do want to announce a few things, if I may, before we conclude that. First of all, on December 25th, Thursday night, will be Hanukkah, the 5th night of Hanukkah. We're going to be doing a Hanukkah drum circle. Drums from everyone. I've done it a few times, even though initially I thought it was like a crazy idea, but it had some real power when I realized the primal force. So I would definitely encourage you. You don't have to trust me, but you tell me afterwards if you regret. Okay. So it'll be Thursday night, December 25th. We already announced in an email or two, but I really encourage, now we've finalized it, it'll be that night. Details to come, exactly what time and how to register and so on. But I would strongly encourage, it's going to be a transformative experience. And like the menorah, we'll also have some music and a few latkes, why not? I will say that last time we did it was in Tonic at a club downtown here, was in East, I think the Lower East Side, and it did sell out. Around 100 to 150 people couldn't get in. So it's not meant to put any pressure on you, but also it is to put pressure on you if you like. But I just wanted to share that just because it gets a pretty popular type of idea. So a drum for everyone. In the beginning you may not like to do it. You don't have to, but I think you'll get into the rhythm as the time goes. So that's one thing I want to say. In addition, tomorrow night, I could announce that last week was a huge success. Philip, my colleague and friend, and actually one of the people who I met back many years ago, came to this class. He was a Hindu when I met him. And I'll let you tell his funny stories about that, but he was a true spiritual person. He's actually a great blues player, Philip Namworth, and he's doing tomorrow night, is it 6:30? 6:30 in the evening, the same place. So if you want to join that, that's an interesting boogie-woogie type of blues experience with his own creative. It's called, I think, his creative spirituality is his class. But it's a very interactive, and that's the second thing I want to say. And finally, being that we have the space and we're initiating different things, I want to say above all, this is a response to many of your requests. So I'm very glad to say this. I feel actually relieved to say this after so many years. We now have the ability, if any of you want to study one-on-one with anyone, or want to go deeper into any ideas, whether it's you heard here or you heard elsewhere, whether it's text-based or other-based, we are now going to offer that as well. So any of you that are interested in that, studying really your own pace or something that may interest you, we have the ability to hook you up. I have here, you could speak to myself, Velvel back there, Adora, who will help organize, as well as, I want to introduce somebody, my own dear flesh and blood, my son. I didn't want to say he's here before because he'd be doing comparisons and see whose nose does he have, etc., etc. That's my son, Mendel. I looked like him once upon a time, not exactly. Mendel is a very trendy dresser and is a type of hipster type. But I want to label him, because hipster can also be like an orthodox conservative form. He's unlabelable. So I want to say he's also one of the people here that is going to be offering different programs and so on. So you could also speak to him. He has his own vibe and energy, and he's independent of me and not in my shadow, and I don't infringe on his space in any way. That's my opinion. You'll have to ask him what he thinks. Cultivate his unique voice. And okay, so if you're not unique, remember you're going to have to answer to me. So I want to, again, so anyone that wants to do any type of studying, we have the space here, we have a big room, we're setting it up for this private and different type of groups. And really you can, in a sense, you must define your own destiny, if you like, in the study arena. If you want to learn how to pray. I mean, we're going to offer plenty of diverse different type of programs and classes, but I think a lot of times things come from, organically, is always very healthy, grassroots type of initiatives. So please feel, we're all grassroots in that sense. Next Tuesday night, with our master cook and musician, Shandy. We'll be doing the Kabbalah of cooking. It's part 3. Next week is the chicken soup, I think, part. So this is Kabbalah of cooking. It's the spirit, the soul behind the cooking, plus some hands-on. And there's some here who can testify to it, right? Is it something?
It was great. Yeah, we
So it'll
made
be part
the
3
challah yesterday.
of 4 parts. They're all self-contained, so you can feel that's next Tuesday night, 7:30. And if you don't get the weekly emails or the emails that we send out, we will be announcing everything in detail as well in the emails. So please make sure to leave your email address here. We don't spam and we don't sell the lists, and we don't give anybody these lists, so it's purely this. And finally, I want to say that this class has been dedicated by Galit in honor of the outside of your beloved father, Chaim ben Naftali, and Sarah Levi, of blessed memory, the 15th of Cheshvan. If anybody wants to sponsor a class or a series of classes or any of these programs, you can see me again or Velvel. And we don't like to say goodbye, so I'll just use the words that I once heard from my great Rebbe after an inspiring evening, and nobody really wanted to pick themselves up. I'm not saying that's the case here, but so he said the following words: we take a little break between one Farbrengen and the next. So we take a little break, and it was a real pleasure to be sitting with you, and I welcome you every Wednesday at the same time. And again, please call us on this offer about studying. Any ideas you have, we are here as friends. Don't be hesitant, don't be fearful. We're all here to welcome you. Everyone have a very good night. And again, please leave your email address if you haven't left it. Thank you so much.